Fall garden cleanup, winterizing a perennial garden before the ground freezes. In this video, I'm going to show you how to winterize a perennial garden before the ground is too hard to be able to garden anymore. Hey guys, Michelle here at The Garden Spot, and in my last video, I gave you a checklist of what to do before the first frost. If you live in the high plains or Mountain West, then you know that the first frost isn't the last frost. You know what I mean? So we're gonna freeze thaw until the ground is finally frozen solid sometime in December. And you can tell we're in real fall now because it is snowing behind me. So in this video, I'm assuming that you've already had a killing frost, meaning your tender plants are gone, the tomatoes are black, and the garden has transformed from like mostly yellow to mostly brown. So if you haven't had your first frost yet, check out my last video for a useful to-do checklist to get ready before you get that first 32 degrees. Now, my channel is all about sustainable gardening in the plains of Mountain West, which means my idea of fall cleanup might look a little bit different from the one that maybe you're used to. When my grandma cleaned her garden for fall, she cleaned it all the way down to bare soil. But now we understand that that's not what's best for our garden. Fallen leaves are great mulch, seed heads are munched on by birds, and insects overwinter in the dried plant matter. And some perennials actually look pretty good in winter, at least, you know, until our first really heavy wet snow, and then they look like crap, but whatever. So unless the perennial in question had a foliar disease like black spot or a scab, or the leaves make a gooey mess like a hosta, you might choose to do a little less in your garden this year. I certainly am. Okay, so in terms of disease, if you live in a wetter climate, this is going to be much more of a concern for you than it is for gardeners in drier, colder climates like South Dakota, Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana. In my cold, dry garden, disease just, it's not really a thing that I worry about. I have other problems. That's not one of them. Real quick before I move on, just know that it's really hard to mess up winterizing your beds. Like, if you literally do nothing, you will actually do something great for your garden and the environment. You really cannot go wrong here. So relax, don't freak out, don't worry, you can do nothing. I actually leave all of the fallen leaves in my garden. I have a big maple that drops a ton of leaves right onto my garden, plus plenty from my neighbors. And at first I thought all the leaves might make like a thick mat and choke out my perennials. So I used to rake them out, chop them up with the lawnmower, and then put them back, which was just a ton of work. So I started to leave them, and it hasn't been a problem. So I'm gonna keep on doing that. Why are we leaving the leaves? The leaves act as insulation from, you know, the bitter cold days like today. And plants that are only marginally hardy here, like my black lace elderberry, they really appreciate all of that cover. But yeah, I totally encourage you to leave the leaves and not cut back your perennials and annuals, but of course, do whatever makes sense for you. This isn't always a reasonable approach, especially if you have an HOA or if your neighbors aren't cool with that. That being said, there are a few things that you absolutely should not cut back at this time. Don't prune spring flowering shrubs like lilacs, fruit trees, and forsythia. They've already formed their flower buds, so if you prune now, you could prune off all your flowers, and that'd be a bummer. But honestly, if you live in zone 5 or colder, or if you live in the Mountain West or Northern Plains, I don't advise you to prune anything in the fall. Any tree or shrub, that is, in the fall. The reason is that our fall season is so short that it's unlikely the plants will have time to heal in time for winter before they go dormant, and any pathogens are still active right now. So open wounds, whether or not the plant is dormant, that's stressful to your plant. As an aside, our short season is also why I don't recommend planting trees, especially conifers, in the fall. There just isn't enough time between those hot August days and winter dormancy for those kinds of plants to get established. So if you can, wait. If you do have to plant in fall, make sure that you water. I wait to do this kind of pruning in very late winter and early spring, around the time of the first spring bulbs come out. So this is like when you'll start to see the leaf buds begin to swell, but they're still far from leafing out. I also cut back my red twig dogwood and smoke bush clear to the ground at this time. You don't have to prune it all the way to the ground, but I like to. I'll also prune back woody herbs. So my thyme and my lavender get chopped in early spring. It's a good time to take cuttings too if you would like to propagate them. Now, don't cut back your grasses. Proven Winter says that you can cut back warm season grasses, which most ornamental grasses are, anytime after the plant goes dormant. But honestly, most of these grasses look just as good in winter as they do in fall, so I don't know why you would in the first place. And leaving them standing provides food and habitat for birds and protects the crown of the plant. Instead, cut them back in early spring, like good old Monty Don advises, and that's right when new growth begins. Just kind of like surfacing, but it's not too tall that you're going to cut into it. So it's not a good time to prune, but it is a good time to plant your spring blooming bulbs and divide herbaceous perennials, which don't need nearly as much time to establish. They can just kind of sit in the soil over winter too, and then start growing out those roots in spring, and it's not such a big deal for them. Another thing I really try to do this time of year is edge. In early spring, I try to stay out of my beds as much as possible because they're just, a little wet and I don't want to compact the soil. So yeah, I like to edge in fall. Probably won't do that today because it's snowing. But it's so nice to look at a crisp edge all winter and early spring. It makes everything look so much tidier, especially if you're leaving leaves in the bed. Now, I do mulch any fallen leaves in the grass. So leaves and your lawn don't really mesh so well. It can cause bare spots, but the grass does appreciate them being ground into leaf mulch. So you can also toss a leaf mulch in your flower beds or veggie beds. Definitely don't waste your leaves by burning them or throwing them away. Right. And lastly, now is a great time to mulch your beds so the mulch can begin breaking down for next year. I like to use arborist chips, which is just, cut up trees, essentially. That's it from the garden spot. I hope you choose to clean up a little less this fall.